Mother-in-law hired a PI to follow me. The PI was my college roommate. Mother-in-law hired a PI to follow me. The PI was my college roommate. The private investigator your mother-in-law hired? That would be me. And honey, you need to know what she's really up to. Those were the words that changed everything. Spoken by my college roommate Sarah Chen as she sat across from me at Starbucks on a rainy Thursday afternoon. My name is Lindsay Hayes, I'm 34 years old, and I work as a financial analyst for Morrison & Associates in downtown Seattle. What I thought would be another boring coffee catch-up turned into the revelation that would destroy my marriage and my mother-in-law's life. I stared at Sarah, processing what she'd just said. We'd been roommates at University of Washington for 3 years, and she'd gone on to become one of the most respected private investigators in the Pacific Northwest. I knew she specialized in corporate fraud and infidelity cases, but I never imagined our paths would cross like this. Eleanor hired you to follow me? I asked quietly, my voice steady despite the shock. Eleanor Whitmore, my mother-in-law of 8 years, had never liked me. She'd made that clear from day one when I started dating her precious son Marcus. But this felt like a new low, even for her. Sarah nodded, her expression a mixture of professional concern and personal sympathy. 3 weeks ago, she paid my firm $15,000 upfront and asked us to document evidence of your alleged affairs. She was convinced you were cheating on Marcus and wanted proof for the divorce proceedings. I almost laughed. In 8 years of marriage, I'd never so much as looked at another man. I worked 60-hour weeks, came home to cook dinner, managed our household finances, and fell asleep most nights reviewing quarterly reports. When exactly was I supposed to be having these affairs? What did you tell her? I asked, taking a sip of my latte with hands that weren't quite steady. That's where it gets interesting, Sarah said, leaning forward. I've been doing this job for 12 years, Lindsay. I know what guilty people look like, and I know what innocent people look like. You? You're cleaner than a church on Sunday. Your biggest transgression in 3 weeks was buying a $7 coffee instead of making it at home. Something cold settled in my stomach. But while I was watching you, I noticed something else. Eleanor isn't just trying to frame you for adultery. She's been having an affair herself. With Dr. James Hartwell, her husband's cardiologist. Sarah pulled out a manila folder. I have photos, hotel receipts, text messages, credit card statements, the works. I sat back in my chair, pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know existed suddenly clicking into place. Richard Whitmore, Eleanor's husband of 32 years, was a retired federal judge worth approximately $4.7 million. He'd been seeing Dr. Hartwell for heart issues for the past 6 months. Eleanor had been unusually attentive to his medical appointments, always insisting on driving him personally. She's been planning to divorce Richard after she destroys your marriage, Sarah continued. From what I've gathered, she wants to claim you corrupted her pure son, drove him to infidelity through your own cheating, violated the sanctity of marriage in their family. It's a play for sympathy and a larger share of Richard's assets when she files. The methodical part of my brain, the part that had earned me a CPA and made me excellent at uncovering financial discrepancies, began processing this information like data points in a complex audit. Eleanor wasn't just vindictive, she was calculating. She was using me as a scapegoat for her own crimes while positioning herself as the long-suffering mother and wife. There's more, Sarah said softly. I think Marcus might be in on it. My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. What do you mean? He's been meeting with a divorce attorney. Peterson & Associates. They specialize in high-asset divorces. The consultation started 4 weeks ago, right before Eleanor hired me. She slid another folder across the table. I'm really sorry, Lindsay. I opened the folder with the same calm I brought to examining corrupted financial statements. Inside were surveillance photos of Marcus entering and leaving the law office, billing records Sarah had obtained through her professional contacts, and copies of preliminary paperwork. All dated before Eleanor had supposedly discovered my fictional infidelity. They planned this together, I said, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. Mother and son, working in tandem. It looks that way. Eleanor creates evidence of your cheating. Marcus plays the devastated husband. They split your shared assets while Eleanor simultaneously positions herself for her own divorce from Richard. She gets sympathy, financial support from her son, and half of her husband's wealth. I closed the folder and looked at Sarah. In college, she'd been the one who helped me study for my most challenging accounting exams. She understood how my mind worked, methodical, thorough, and absolutely unforgiving when it came to fraud. "What do you need from me?" I asked. Sarah smiled, the same smile she'd worn when we'd plotted elaborate pranks on our obnoxious neighbor's junior year. "I was hoping you'd ask that. I have a proposal." Over the next 2 hours, Sarah laid out what she'd discovered during her investigation. Eleanor and Dr. Hartwell had been meeting every Tuesday and Friday at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, always, in room 1247. They'd charged over $8,000 in hotel services, dinners, and weekend getaways to a credit card Eleanor thought was secret. Dr. Hartwell had been prescribing Richard unnecessary medications while billing his insurance for inflated services. Eleanor had been slowly liquidating personal assets, jewelry, artwork, bonds, converting them to cash accounts Richard didn't know about. The financial fraud alone could result in serious charges, I noted, reviewing the documentation Sarah had compiled. Dr. Hartwell could lose his medical license. Eleanor could face criminal prosecution for financial elder abuse if we can prove she's been manipulating Richard's medication to keep him compliant. Exactly. But here's what I'm thinking. What if we let them hang themselves? Sarah's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of confronting them directly, we would feed Eleanor exactly what she wanted, evidence of my infidelity. But we would create it ourselves, controlling every detail, while simultaneously documenting her affair and Marcus's complicity. When they pulled the trigger on their scheme, we'd be ready with nuclear-level evidence of their own crimes. "I'll need 2 weeks to prepare," I told Sarah. "I want financial forensics on every account, every transaction, every asset they think they've hidden. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." That evening, I went home to the house I'd spent 8 years making into a home for my husband. Marcus was in his study, supposedly working on architectural drawings for his firm. I knocked softly and entered when he called out. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up, the same question he'd asked every day for 8 years. "Productive," I replied honestly. "I had coffee with Sarah Chen. You remember her from college? The one who became a private investigator?" Now he looked up and I caught something in his expression. A flicker of concern, quickly suppressed. "That's right. She's doing really well for herself. Apparently, she's been hired for some very high-profile cases lately." I kept my voice casual, conversational. "Anyway, I'm going to work a bit late tomorrow. Morrison & Associates landed a new audit client, and you know how thorough I like to be with the preliminary reviews." "Of course," Marcus said, but I noticed his hands had stopped moving across the blueprint. "Will you be home for dinner?" "Probably not. Don't wait up." Over the next 12 days, I worked with the precision that had made me one of the youngest senior analysts at Morrison & Associates. Sarah and I met every evening, usually at different locations around the city. She coached me on counter-surveillance techniques, while I used my financial expertise to trace the money trail Eleanor and Dr. Hartwell had been trying to hide. What we discovered was worse than we'd initially suspected. Dr. Hartwell had been systematically overcharging Richard's insurance for nearly a year, billing for procedures that were never performed and prescribing medications that were not just unnecessary, but potentially harmful when combined. Eleanor had been filling the prescriptions faithfully, keeping Richard in a state of mild cognitive fog that made him less likely to question her financial decisions. "This isn't just an affair," I told Sarah as we reviewed lab results she'd obtained from a contact at the hospital. "This is long-term poisoning for financial gain." "Richard could have died," Sarah said grimly. "The combination of medications Hartwell prescribed? It's a miracle he hasn't had a stroke." Meanwhile, Sarah had been feeding Eleanor carefully crafted reports about my supposed activities. We created a fictional affair with a colleague named David Thompson, a composite identity based on 3 different men who worked in my building, but whom Eleanor would never think to verify independently. Sarah provided photos of me entering restaurants and hotels at suspicious times, carefully edited to suggest clandestine meetings, while omitting any evidence of who I was actually meeting. The photos were technically truthful. I was indeed meeting someone secretly and regularly. That someone was Sarah herself, and we were planning the complete destruction of Eleanor's life. On day 10, Marcus approached me about marriage counseling. "I've been thinking," he said over breakfast, his voice carrying just the right note of concerned husband. "We haven't been as close lately. Maybe we should talk to someone." "What kind of someone?" I asked, buttering my toast with the same calm I'd maintained for nearly 2 weeks. Dr. Patricia Newman. She specializes in couples therapy, particularly around trust issues. He paused meaningfully. "Mom recommended her, actually. Said she's helped several people in similar situations." Almost admired the setup. Get me into therapy with a counselor Eleanor had already briefed. Create a controlled environment where they could introduce their evidence of my infidelity. Document my reactions for use in divorce proceedings. It was sophisticated manipulation. "That sounds like a wonderful idea," I said sincerely. "When can we start?" Marcus looked surprised by my enthusiasm, but quickly recovered. "I'll call her today." That afternoon, Sarah called me with an update. "Eleanor made a mistake. She got greedy." "What do you mean?" "She tried to hire a second PI firm. Apparently, she wanted a backup investigator in case I didn't find enough evidence to satisfy her timeline. The firm she approached does a lot of work with Peterson and Associates, Marcus's lawyers. They called me to coordinate efforts. This was the break we'd been waiting for. Eleanor's impatience had revealed the scope of her conspiracy and provided us with additional evidence of premeditation. Sarah was now in contact with the second firm, who had agreed to cooperate with our investigation after reviewing the evidence of Dr. Hartwell's medical fraud. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "Richard called my office this morning. He wants to hire me." I felt my pulse quicken. "For what?" "He's suspicious about Eleanor's Tuesday and Friday activities. Apparently, his mind has been clearer lately. I think his body is recovering from whatever cocktail Hartwell had him on, and he started noticing discrepancies in their joint accounts." This was perfect. Richard was naturally uncovering his wife's deception while we prepared to reveal the full scope of her crimes. The timing couldn't have been better. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd be happy to help, but I wanted to be transparent about potential conflicts of interest. We're meeting tomorrow morning." The next phase of our plan required split-second timing and flawless execution. Sarah would begin working for Richard officially, investigating Eleanor's activities with his full knowledge and consent. This would provide legal cover for all the surveillance evidence we'd already gathered. Simultaneously, Eleanor would receive the final evidence of my affair, photos she would inevitably share with Marcus and their divorce attorney. The marriage counseling session was scheduled for the following Tuesday. That morning, Sarah delivered her final report to Eleanor, a manila envelope containing photos of me allegedly entering hotel rooms, meeting with my fictional lover, and behaving in ways that could be construed as intimate. The photos were masterful illusions, technically accurate but completely misleading. Eleanor called Marcus within 2 hours of receiving the report. Sarah was monitoring Eleanor's phone as part of her official investigation for Richard, so we heard the entire conversation in real time. "She's been cheating for weeks," Eleanor said, her voice sharp with vindictive satisfaction. "We have everything we need: photos, hotel records, a complete timeline. That little gold digger thought she was so clever, but we caught her." "Are you sure?" Marcus asked, and I had to admire his acting. He sounded like a man receiving devastating news about his beloved wife. "Absolutely sure. Meet me at Peterson's office at 4. We're filing tomorrow." That evening, Marcus came home with red eyes and a performance worthy of an Emmy Award. He sat me down in our living room, the room where I'd hosted his family for 8 Thanksgivings and Christmases, and told me he knew about my affair. "Had hoped the counseling session would help us work through this," he said, his voice breaking at exactly the right moments. "But Mom received some information today that changes everything." He showed me the photos Sarah had created, each one a tiny masterpiece of misdirection. There I was, looking guilty as sin and completely innocent at the same time. "Marcus," I said quietly, "I understand why these might look suspicious, but I can explain every single—" "Don't," he interrupted, standing up abruptly. "Just don't. I trusted you, Lindsay. I loved you, and you threw away 8 years for some random guy from your office." "David from accounting," I said, playing my part perfectly. "His name is David." The look of pain that crossed Marcus's face was so convincing that for a moment I almost forgot he was performing. I can't even look at you right now. I'm staying at Mom's tonight. We'll figure out the details later. After he left, I sat alone in our house and allowed myself exactly 10 minutes to mourn the marriage that had never been real. Then I called Sarah. Phase 2 is complete, I reported. How did your meeting with Richard go? Better than expected. He's filing for divorce tomorrow morning. I gave him everything we have on Eleanor and Dr. Hartwell, plus the financial forensics. You prepared. His attorney says it's the most comprehensive evidence package he's seen in 20 years of family law. And the medical board complaint? Filed this afternoon. Dr. Hartwell will have his license suspended pending investigation by Friday. The insurance fraud charges will follow within the week. Criminal charges against Eleanor? The DA's office is reviewing the elder abuse case. The financial manipulation, combined with the medical conspiracy, should be enough for formal charges. We're looking at potential felony convictions. I felt something settle in my chest. Not quite peace, but close. What happens next? Tomorrow, Eleanor and Marcus file for divorce on your behalf, using fraudulent evidence. The moment they submit that paperwork, they've committed several crimes including fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. Richard's attorney will be waiting in the courthouse to serve Eleanor with her own divorce papers, along with criminal complaints and a restraining order. And Marcus? Conspiracy to commit fraud, at minimum. The law firm he hired will be investigated for ethics violations. Using fabricated evidence in divorce proceedings is a career-ending mistake. His architectural firm will likely distance themselves from him once this becomes public. The marriage counseling appointment was scheduled for 10 a.m. the following Tuesday. Dr. Patricia Newman's office was in a glass building downtown. All modern furniture and inspirational posters about communication and trust. Marcus arrived separately, maintaining the fiction that we were a couple in crisis rather than co-conspirators in an elaborate deception. Or rather, maintaining the fiction that I didn't know about the conspiracy. Dr. Newman was a thin woman in her 50s with the kind of practiced empathy that came from years of listening to people's problems. She seated us in comfortable chairs facing each other and opened her notebook with professional efficiency. I understand you've been referred by Eleanor Whitmore, she began, glancing between Marcus and me. She mentioned there have been some trust issues in your marriage. That's putting it mildly, Marcus said, his voice heavy with the weight of betrayal. I found out my wife has been having an affair. Dr. Newman turned to me with the expression of someone accustomed to hearing denials, justifications, and tearful confessions. Lindsay, how do you respond to that? It's not what it looks like, I said, which was absolutely true. I can explain everything, but I don't think Marcus wants to hear it. Try me, Marcus said coldly. I took a deep breath and looked directly into the eyes of the man who had planned to destroy my reputation and steal half of everything I'd worked for. The person I've been meeting with is Sarah Chen. She's a private investigator and she's my college roommate. We've been working together for the past 3 weeks. Marcus's expression didn't change, but I saw him tense slightly. Working on... What? Your mother hired Sarah to investigate me. She paid $15,000 for evidence of an affair that doesn't exist. I kept my voice steady, matter of fact. What your mother didn't know is that Sarah and I have been friends for 15 years. So, instead of investigating me, Sarah investigated your mother. Now Marcus went very still. Dr. Newman was looking between us with growing confusion. I don't understand, Dr. Newman said slowly. Eleanor Whitmore has been having an affair with Dr. James Hartwell for 6 months. I continued, my voice gaining strength. She's been systematically defrauding her husband, manipulating his medical care, and planning to divorce him after destroying my marriage. The photos she showed you, Marcus? They're real photos of me meeting with Sarah to plan the complete exposure of your mother's crimes. Marcus stood up so quickly his chair nearly fell over. You're lying. Sarah is testifying before a grand jury this afternoon about Dr. Hartwell's insurance fraud. Eleanor will be arrested for financial elder abuse by the end of the week. And you, Marcus, will be charged with conspiracy to commit fraud for helping her fabricate evidence of my infidelity. Dr. Newman was staring at both of us like we were speaking in tongues. I think we need to stop this session. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out a small recording device. I think we're exactly where we need to be. Marcus, would you like to explain to Dr. Newman how you and your mother plan to frame me for adultery while stealing half my assets and destroying my reputation? The color drained from Marcus's face. Lindsay, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You both underestimated me. I stood up and gathered my purse. Dr. Newman, I apologize for involving you in this deception. You'll probably want to cooperate fully with the ethics investigation that's coming your way. I walked toward the door, then turned back to face my husband of 8 years. Oh, and Marcus, I've already filed for divorce. My attorney is significantly more competent than yours, and my evidence is completely real. You might want to call your mother and warn her that the police will be at Dr. Hartwell's office within the hour. I left them there. Marcus pale and shaking, Dr. Newman frantically taking notes, both of them finally understanding that the quiet, dedicated wife and daughter-in-law had been several steps ahead of them the entire time. Outside the building, Sarah was waiting by her car, wearing the biggest smile I'd seen since college. How did it feel? She asked as I approached. Honestly, like the best audit I've ever completed. Every number balanced, every discrepancy explained, every fraud exposed. Richard's divorce papers were served 20 minutes ago, Sarah reported. Eleanor was at Dr. Hartwell's office when the police arrived with the warrant. She's currently being questioned about insurance fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. And Dr. Hartwell? Medical license suspended, hospital privileges revoked, under investigation by both state and federal authorities. The insurance companies are pursuing civil suits for the fraudulent billing. He's looking at serious jail time. We stood there for a moment, watching the city move around us. People hurrying to appointments, conducting business, living their lives without knowing that a small but significant piece of justice had just been served in a glass building downtown. What's next for you? Sarah asked. I start at Henderson. And associates next month, I said. Senior partner track specializing in forensic accounting. Apparently, my reputation for solving complex fraud cases has gotten some attention. And personally, I considered the question. Marcus and I would be divorced within 6 months. Eleanor would likely serve prison time. Dr. Hartwell's career was over. Richard would recover his health and his assets. The truth would come out. My reputation would be restored, and everyone who had conspired against me would face consequences proportionate to their crimes. I think I'm going to be just fine, I said. The divorce proceedings were a masterclass in just desserts. Marcus's attorney withdrew from the case within a week after learning about the fraudulent evidence. Peterson and Associates faced ethics sanctions and a civil lawsuit from Richard's legal team. Marcus was forced to represent himself while facing criminal charges that made him unemployable in his chosen profession. Eleanor's trial made local news. A federal judge's wife conducting a 6-month affair while systematically poisoning him and stealing his assets made for compelling headlines. Dr. Hartwell testified against her in exchange for a reduced sentence, describing in detail how she had approached him about manipulating Richard's medical care to keep him compliant. The financial forensics I had prepared were instrumental in securing Eleanor's conviction. She was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for elder abuse, insurance, fraud, and conspiracy. Her assets were seized to pay restitution to Richard and the insurance companies Dr. Hartwell had defrauded. Richard recovered fully once his medication regimen was corrected. He sent me a handwritten card thanking me for exposing Eleanor's crimes and saving his life. He also included a check for $50,000, a reward for my role in uncovering the fraud that had been slowly killing him. Marcus and I finalized our divorce 8 months after Eleanor hired Sarah to investigate me. He kept the house, which I had never particularly liked, and his debts from the criminal defense attorney he'd been forced to hire. I kept my retirement accounts, my professional reputation, and my sense of dignity. At the final hearing, Marcus approached me